Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa ahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa 'allimna ma yanfa'una. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Brothers and sisters, we're quickly approaching the end of the month, which means that we're also approaching the end of the Quran, or a recitation of the Quran. And tonight we're on Juz 29, the second to last juz in the Quran. And there are a few different surahs that make up this juz. But we're going to be focusing on, inshallah, just one juz and only a few ayat from that juz. One surah and only a few ayat from that surah. That surah is Surah Al-Mulk. And there are many different reasons why we would focus on this surah, but there are so many different virtues that are associated with Surah Al-Mulk. Narrated by Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anh, he narrates that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna surata min al-Qur'ani 30 ayah." So there is surely a surah from the Quran that has 30 ayahs. Shafa'at li rajulin hatta ghufira lah, and it intercedes for a person until that person is completely forgiven. Wa hiya suratu tabaraka alladhi biyadihi al-mulk, and that surah is the surah Tabaraka alladhi biyadihi al-mulk. It's reported that Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anh also said that Surah Tabaraka alladhi biyadihi al-mulk is that which protects against the punishment of the grave. He used that word mani'a. It's something that protects against punishment when you're in the grave, and it intercedes for you. And according to a hadith of Jabir radiyallahu anh, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with him, he said that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that he did not sleep until he recited two surahs, Surah Sajda and Surah Mulk. Every single night he would do it before sleeping. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those people that have that practice. Ameen. And the surah starts off, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Tabaraka alladhi biyadihi al-mulk wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Tabarak, blessed is the one, and may he be blessed. Right? The passive and the active, both forms of that word, are rolled up into this word Tabarak. Tabarak alladhi biyadihi al-mulk, and it's a word that is exclusively reserved only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May he be blessed, and blessed is he. Alladhi khalaqa Tabarak alladhi biyadihi al-mulk wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. The one whose in hand is ownership, dominion, kingdom, power, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, and he is in complete control over all things. What's important to focus on in this first ayah of Surah Al-Mulk, of this surah that has 30 verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off with the idea of barakah, blessing. And he says that he is the possessor and the source of blessing. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends to put blessing in something, it doesn't matter how difficult it may be, the impossible can soon become possible. Right? No matter how, if you ever felt your back against the wall in a certain situation, if you've ever felt that you're in a certain time crunch and it seemed like it was an impossible situation to get out of, it seemed like it wasn't something that was going to go your way, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to put barakah either in your time or your ability or your agency, your capability, and then you were able to remove yourself from that situation, you were able to finish something by a certain deadline, then you understand this concept of barakah. Barakah is when a seemingly small quantity can be magnified just because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decision to put blessing in it. And it's important to recognize this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off saying that he is the one with this attribute. And in his hand is all kingship and dominion. He is the one who deserves to have sovereignty. He's the one who deserves to be worshipped. He's the one who deserves to have capability over all things. وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And he's completely capable over all things. What's important is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he is the source of all blessing, and he also is the one who has capability, full capability over all things. Alhamdulillah, we are people who believe in monotheism. We're people who believe in all of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being put into one God. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, his capability, his might, his forbearance, his gentleness, all of these things are attributes that are rolled up into, all of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are rolled up into Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. These are all attributes of him. Alhamdulillah, we don't have the belief that these attributes are separated by different gods, right? So imagine if we had the belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was fully capable over all things, but then there was a different God that we had to turn to who was the source of all blessing, right? So one of them has capability over all things, but he's not necessarily the one who blesses things. And then the other one can bless certain things, but then maybe he's not the one who has capability over all things, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has unified all of these different qualities into himself. He is the one with all of these qualities rolled up inside of himself. And because of that, he is worthy of worship. He's worthy of our devotion. He's worthy of our obedience. He is the one that we have to turn to and trust for all of our affairs to be disposed. And it's a very important thing because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this surah, in Surah Al-Mulk, there are many different themes that he goes through. But the first theme that he talks about is his might. All of these capabilities, all of these things that he's created, all of the dominion that he is in charge of. And we have to understand that this is the Lord that we worship. This one who has all of this might is the one that we turn to be the disposer of our affairs. And that's very important when we are trying to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how he acts in our lives. We turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because he has that supreme power, because nobody else does. He goes on and he says, he's the one who created death and life. الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. In order to test you, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, to see which of you is the best in terms of deeds. And we take away from this verse number one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who has the capability to create life and death. He's the one who when so many different people around us have tried to create life either in a lab or in artificial means, when people have claimed, like dictators, and we know the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Nimrod, when these dictators or these people who thought they had power, who came before us, thought that they had the ability to create life and death as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is number one, the sole being who has that capability. He is the one, alladhi خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ. The second one is, the second blessing or the second virtue that we can take away from this verse is the question that arises when we look at the order that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said it in this verse. He says, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ. And he says death first. And what's interesting about that order, right? Normally we always think about life and death as a pair in that sequence. We always think about life and death coming, we always think about our life and then the death that will come at the end of that life. But the scholars, the mufassirin, they comment on why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this instance may have said death first. And what they say is understood by the second half of the verse. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. In order to test you and determine which of you is best in terms of deeds. The death that's referred to in this verse is the death that we experience at the end of our lives, and the life that comes after it is the afterlife. And it's important to reflect on this because without afterlife, this world would not be a test. So the liyabluwakum wouldn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. And we reflect on this because how many people around us live this life as if there is no afterlife? How many people around us have completely rejected the idea of a life coming after this, have rejected the idea of account? In fact, we learn from the Surah Safat, there's a story in Surah Safat where there's a group of people who are enjoying the blessings of Jannah. They're talking about all of the, they're enjoying the alcohol that doesn't cause them to be intoxicated. They're enjoying the fruits and reclining on these chairs, and they're reflecting and reminiscing on their life in this world. And one of them from amongst the groups, he remembers a companion that he had in this life, and he remembers that companion saying to him, يَقُولُ أَإِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُصَدِّقِينَ. Are you really one of those people that believes? أَإِذَا مِتْنَا وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا وَعِظَامًا أَإِنَّا لَمَدِينُونَ. Are we really going to die and then become dust and bones and then be resurrected and then held to account for what we've done? Right? So this man, this companion of the man who is now in Jannah reflecting, is mocking this man for his belief and saying, there's no way that we're actually going to be resurrected. There's no way that we're actually going to have to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and account for what we've done. There's no way that we're going to have to experience heaven and hell, right? This is it. This life that we're in right now is it. And then the man who's in Jannah now, he tells his companions, قَالَ هَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُطَّلِعُونَ, do you want to see where that man is now? فَاطَّلَعَ فَرَآهُ فِي سَوَاءِ الْجَحِيمِ, and they look upon him and they see that he's in the center of hellfire. There's a severe punishment associated in the Quran with these people who mocked and these people who denied completely the afterlife. And there are a few different aspects of why denying the afterlife is so detrimental to our understanding, why it causes so much ruin and destruction in this life. There are many, but we'll just talk about a few. Number one, when you deny the existence of afterlife, your life in this life becomes selfish, right? Your sole purpose in this life is to enjoy, to taste different pleasures, to fulfill your desires, right? And we see different people who have this kind of existence, right? The only thing that they're focused on is tasting a new thing, is trying a new drink, is experiencing a new experience, is having the company of a new person. And it goes on like this without ever being able to fulfill the real desire for something higher, and then they die. And that selfishness leads to, it can lead to immoral actions because yourself is put ahead of all of the needs of other people around you. And it can also lead to infringement upon other people's rights. So oppression and injustice can become rampant because of the fact that now nobody believes in accountability. Without any afterlife, there is no accountability. There's no standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no need to do justice in this life without recognition here. Because if there's no recognition in the next life, then it doesn't count at all, right? So there's these understandings that become very flawed because of the fact that a person has now denied the afterlife. And then finally, difficulty in this and suffering in this life doesn't make sense is a big one that comes from not understanding that there could possibly be, or that there is definitely, depending on your perspective, an afterlife. And we see this around us now, right? Things like plagues and epidemics that are happening, they seem to just kind of be random. They seem to be happenstance because nobody believes that it is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as he says in this verse, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. When you are placed in a situation of test and difficulty, it is upon you to now turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in obedience, to reflect on what you may have learned or what you may be tasked with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trying to teach you, and to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with increased closeness after the test. But it can be very, very difficult without that understanding of trial. And it seems as if everything that we're experiencing is completely random. Before we end, I want to talk about one final element of Surah Al-Mulk that is necessary for us in these last couple of nights of Ramadan, and that's the lesson of consistency. We talked about how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would recite this surah every single night, and inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us of those people who have that practice as well. But it's something for all of us to reflect on, because especially nearing the end of Ramadan, a lot of us can maybe feel like we went this entire month and didn't really hit our goals for obedience to Allah. We had really high aspirations and standards that we started off the month with, and maybe it dropped down a little bit. Maybe we didn't meet all of those goals. Maybe we didn't get to those goals that we had hoped for. And it can be a little bit demoralizing to think that now Ramadan is ending, that period where we were given that boost, and now we have to go back to real life and deal with all of the other things that we were dealing with before. We learned from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the best deeds are those deeds that are consistent, even if they're little. And the Surah Al-Mulk is a very short surah, 30 ayahs or so, 30 ayahs, but only about 2.5 pages. And it's something, inshallah, that can be built upon with consistency that spans into the rest of our life. The question, inshallah, that we can ask ourselves at the end of this month is, what are those acts that maybe we have started doing in this month that we want to continue into the rest of the month? What are those things that we were able to do with consistency, or maybe with not as much consistency as we had hoped, that we wish to extend into the next year, so that when we enter, inshallah, the next Ramadan, we're not starting from the same starting place we did at the beginning of this month, that we're starting from a level that's higher. Inshallah, we're becoming closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whether it be, a certain amount of Quran you were reading on a daily basis, the prayers and the nawafil that you were doing on a daily basis, whether it be even just a conversation that you were having daily with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and du'as that you were asking him, a moment of reflection is necessary to understand and to set a goal for this coming year, to make sure that we know what we plan to aspire to as Ramadan ends. And we mentioned the idea of dua as well. One thing that was a consistent habit of the Sahaba was to make dua for those people that are around you, for your companions, daily in your sujood, to remember those people by name. And we have a couple in the community that has a 3-year-old son that has just been admitted into the ER today, and we ask Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to give their son a complete cure, and to make this trial easy on the parents, and to allow it to be a means of expiation and purification for them and the entire family. But it's something that we reflect on more and more, just as Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is testing all of us in the situations that are around us. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to make us people who benefit from this Ramadan. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to make us people who end this month better than we started. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to give us consistency in our actions, to give us lofty aspirations for deeds, but also lofty ability, so that we're able to meet those aspirations with His help. وصلى الله عليه وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. One last thing, if you've benefited from these khawatir that you've listened to over the entire month, don't forget to subscribe to the MFC YouTube channel. Inshallah, you can get updates for the content that's being released, and you can keep in touch with the community that way. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.